So how do you create curiosity? How do you generate that? Well, there's a guy named Lowenstein who's an economist, I believe, and he's put out some papers about something called information gap theory. And the way information gap theory, basically what he says is that curiosity happens when we feel a gap in our knowledge. Curiosity happens when we feel a gap in our knowledge. So to create these info gaps, to create curiosity, we don't put the entire full story of something in the lead. Okay? We just put partial information about something in the lead. And you can kind of see a little picture there on the handout that if you have too much information that people are getting, they're gonna check out. They're gonna hit a wall and be like, I kind of know where this is going, and it's not for me. They're gonna make decisions about whatever your big idea is. Whereas if you pull out some of the information, only give them part of the story, kind of build up a mystery, an information gap, then it's gonna pull them through. So when you're trying to create an info gap, you need the information first, and that's where we had the last session about the research side of it, which you should be doing as the technique for producing ideas. You need to fill your head up with, John Capel said 7 times the information you think you're going to need. That's another thing too, it's like hard to write a mystery if you don't know the end, right? That's why you need to know your big idea cold. You need to know lots of interesting things about it, because otherwise what are you teasing in your lead, right?
Give you a good example of an info gap of something that you guys may see a lot of but may not realize it's happening. Who saw Pulp Fiction? How did Pulp Fiction start? Somebody tell me. What?
Yeah, they're in the coffee shop, right?
They're in the coffee shop.
Yeah.
What happens in the coffee shop?
Robbery.
A robbery. And then what happens? Do you know how it turned out? No.
Yeah. Not until the end.
No, not until the end. So what happens is, if you remember Pulp Fiction, Quentin Tarantino started at the climactic part of the event, right? They're at the coffee shop. If I remember correct, somebody comes up to him with a gun, and they're going to rob him. They're going to rob the coffee shop, and then it stops. And then it backtracks. So you don't know what happened, right? There's a huge info gap in that story. And you don't know about that until the end. So think about that in your lead, right? You want to open curiosity in your lead that you may not fulfill upon until pages deep in your promotion. When you sit down and write your headline and lead, you want to think about it like that Quentin Tarantino opening of Pulp Fiction. Tell them some of the story, create an info gap that you're going to solve later into the copy. What is that going to do? It's going to get them to read later into the copy, because we as human beings don't like the feeling that we have when we don't know the full story. That's why gossipy websites work so well, right? Because people want to know where the story ends. So if you open the story, you tease them in the lead, you're going to connect and close that story later on in the copy. You're almost going to unconsciously force people to read on into that copy. If you tell them everything right up front and you don't leave anything else to the imagination, they may not read on, because they say, I get the full story, right? I don't need to read on. So when you watch certain movies and films that are done well from certain directors and storytellers, you'll see a lot of info gaps that create that tease and that excitement and that hormonal release, right, that we get from anticipation that are built into our bodies. So you can get that same hormonal release in copy, force people to read on because of that anticipation builds. Does that make sense?
7 is a good movie for that. This movie, one of my favorite movies, actually, Michael Douglas' The Game. That's a great movie. So, you got to give them something. We'll get more next week, proof. But you don't need, part of it is just giving them partial information. And teas don't sell. Teas don't sell. So all of you guys should have read Great Leads. So we're not going to spend a lot of time on that stuff in there. If you haven't read it, you need to read it. We give you these books. We want you to read them before the session. Well, we'll talk about a little bit. It's in the book, and the book probably explains it better. It's also in the Gene Schwartz book that we hand out. The idea of awareness scales and indirect versus direct. And there's kind of two different levels you can think of that. One is like the idea itself, kind of maybe the investment idea behind it, and how sophisticated or aware the prospect is of that. So you can kind of see that in Bitcoin related leads going back the last 12 months, how originally you just make kind of a big promise, $50 Bitcoin blueprint, and now it kind of got to like crypto codes and other things that are a lot more indirect, because people are just, that market's been so swamped with other people advertising cryptocurrency ideas that they've gotten a lot more sophisticated and aware of the idea, so that makes them have to, and makes the better lead types that seem to work become more and more indirect. Okay. The other thing is that there's also the idea of front end and back end, and that front end you're going to need to be a little more indirect than you would on a back end, where you can be a little more direct. Some of that, like you might think of that would be like if you were driving your car and you got a flat tire and you were in your own neighborhood, okay, there's a couple streets away so you don't want to walk, and you have to go to a neighbor to get help, you could be a lot more direct because you're from the same neighborhood, you might even know the person. You just go up to them and say, hey, can you help me with my car, right? If you were in a strange neighborhood, say on the west side of Baltimore, and your car broke down, and you had to go to get some help, you'd have to be a little more indirect in how you ask for help. You'd have to give them a story or something, and you just wouldn't.
You run.
You run for life. But so that's like if you look at it from our business, the strangers are the front end new customers for customer acquisition, and typically when you deal with them, you just can't say like, hey, I got this great promise and how I can make a bunch of money, and people are like, whoa, like just imagine if you met Rich at a bar tonight and you had an idea to a newsletter to sell him, you wouldn't just go out and start selling them, because you'd be like, whoa, like you creep them out. But if he's an existing customer and he already is reading the front end newsletters and he's happy and he's using those ideas, he's an existing customer, you can be a little more direct with them because they want to know more already. So if someone's already reading Jim Rickards stuff or James Altucher stuff or any of our other editors of front end letters, they want more. So you can be a little more direct and say, hey, I have this great thing for you.
So I'm going to put this in context again. So I just want to keep repeating this because repetition's key for not only what we do here, but what we do for our readers. So number one, you have an ordinary idea. Number two, you have an extraordinary idea. The next thing I would do is sit down and think, I know my mission is to interrupt someone's day and get them to pay attention, right? That's the expression of the extraordinary. But then I would sit there and I'd think and I'd say, okay, number one, I need to know who I'm writing to, because who I'm writing to is going to shift how I interrupt their day. If I already know, if the people who I'm writing to know me, I don't need as big of a sledgehammer to get their attention, because there's already a relationship there. If the people that I'm writing to don't know me, I need a big sledgehammer, because they don't have any clue who I am, they're not looking for my shit, there's no relationship there. So until you understand who your audience is, you shouldn't be writing a pattern interrupt. You shouldn't be writing a headline lead. You need to know who your audience is. Is it someone that has a relationship with you? And then you need to know the idea and where that stands in the marketplace. Is this an idea that they're generally aware of? Because again, if that's the case, you need a different pattern interrupt versus an idea that if they aren't aware of, right? If no one understands what the shit Bitcoin is, your pattern interrupt isn't going to mention Bitcoin. If people understand what Bitcoin is, you need to provide a new spin, a new mechanism on Bitcoin. So you can't write your pattern interrupts, you can't write your headlines and your leads until you do a whole lot of thinking. Who am I writing to? What's the stage of awareness of that idea in the marketplace? So a lot of people don't do that, right? A lot of people just say, here's my ordinary idea, here it is in the expression of the ordinary. But they're not thinking about what the stage of the market is or who they're writing to. One of the critiques that I gave Jimmy and Rob after they pitched, if you remember their pitch a couple weeks ago, on that research document that Ryan gave out, their pitch, if you guys remember it, well, I know you guys remember it.
Yeah.
If everybody else remembers it, was basically what to do with your money now. And the critique that I gave them, that was the headline, right? The critique that I gave them on that pitch is that, well, who are you writing to, right? Is this, because you guys said it was a front end at that point. I would only care about a pattern interrupt that said what to do with your money now if I knew who was writing to me and I had a relationship with that person that I trusted. Then if I'm like, oh, I super trust this person and now they're going to share what to do with my money, now maybe I'd pay attention. But on the front end, if I'm someone trolling Facebook and I see an ad that says what to do with your money now from someone I don't know who the shit it is, I don't pay attention to that. So that pattern interrupt might work on the back end where there's a relationship established, will not work on the front end where there's no relationship established. So that's a lot of stuff you got to think of, right? So I'm just trying to put this all in context because we're talking about a lot of theory, but I just want to show how that all comes together. If you try to write a headline, if you try to write a lead, and you don't know if it's the front end or back end, and you don't know where your idea sits in the awareness of the marketplace, you're making a grave mistake because your headline, your lead, your pattern interrupt will not be in the best shape until you understand those categorical things about your market. Do they know who I am? Is there a relationship established? Where does that idea sit in the marketplace as far as awareness or non-awareness? So as you're thinking through expressing that extraordinary idea, you got to really think through all of those pieces.
So a couple of examples for you that I have in the sheet here. You can see they're all actually front ends. So when I was first studying great leads, I was a little bit confused. I was like, well, you know, like offer leads are very direct, and story leads are very indirect. So therefore, never use offer leads on the front